Have you ever walked into a room and felt unseen, as if others could read hidden currents while you were left guessing? It's a quiet unease, wondering what lies behind a smile. What truth is revealed, not in words, but in gestures too subtle to catch? Most of us mistake noise for knowledge, emotion for clarity, and end up outplayed in moments that matter most. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They knew that strength is not built by speaking louder or moving faster, but by seeing more deeply. Observation, restraint, and silence were their weapons, not to deceive, but to live with clarity. Think of times you were misled or underestimated. Often it wasn't because others were wiser, but because you were distracted by pride, fear, or hope. In this reflection, I want to share how to outsmart others quietly through calm eyes, steady presence, and the patience to let them reveal themselves. Stay with me. 1. Detach from emotion. Have you ever noticed how, in the heat of an argument, your ears seem to close even as your mouth stays wide open? The words of the other person blur into background noise, not because they are meaningless, but because anger has taken the wheel. Or perhaps you've sat across from someone you cared about, too nervous or too hopeful to truly hear what was being said, so consumed by the question, do they feel the same? That you missed the very signals that might have given you clarity. These are ordinary moments, yet within them lies a powerful truth. When emotion dominates the mind, perception bends, and what is obvious becomes invisible. The Stoics warned us about this blindness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength begins the moment you recognize that emotions, no matter how natural, no matter how justified, cloud your vision. To outsmart others without them knowing, you must first step outside the storm within yourself. Imagine for a moment a soldier standing on a battlefield. The fog of war rolls thick across the field. Men are shouting, swords clash, the air itself seems to tremble. In the chaos, the soldier can either lose himself to fear and rage, slashing blindly at shadows, or he can still his breath and listen. Through the noise, he notices details, footsteps approaching from behind, the glint of an enemy's blade half hidden in the mist. His survival does not come from brute force, but from clarity. Life is not always so dramatic, but in its own way, every crowded office meeting, every family dispute, every tense negotiation is a battlefield. When you are clouded by emotions, you slash at shadows. When you are calm, you see. I remember meeting someone who was always quick to anger in conversation. Even small disagreements would flare into heated debates. At first, I mistook it for passion, a sign that they cared deeply about truth. But as I observed, I realized their anger was their weakness. While they shouted, others stayed quiet, watching, learning, and using that knowledge later. Their blind rage revealed far more about their fears and insecurities than any words could have. The more they lost control, the more predictable they became. Contrast that with the rare individual who remains calm under provocation, the one who listens, who does not react immediately, who lets silence hang in the air. That person unnerves everyone else. They outsmart the crowd without saying a word. Detachment, as the Stoics taught, is not about cold indifference. Seneca reminded us, he suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary. Emotions magnify suffering by adding layers of fear, anger, or desire over the bare facts of reality. Detachment is clarity, not cruelty. When you detach, you don't stop feeling, you simply refuse to let the feeling drive your judgment. You may still feel anger rising, but instead of lashing out, you observe it like watching clouds drift across the sky. You may still feel nervous before a conversation, but you recognize it as merely the body preparing for what lies ahead, not a sign that you are unworthy. In that space of awareness, you reclaim control, and with control comes insight. Think of a conversation with a manipulator. They thrive on your reactions. If they insult you, they want your defensiveness. If they flatter you, they want your eagerness. Every rise, every fall in your emotions is a thread they can pull. But what if you gave them nothing? What if, instead of reacting, you simply observed? Their words would dangle in the air like hooks in the water, but without your bite, they catch nothing. Soon, it is they who grow restless, revealing more of themselves in the silence than they ever intended. This is the essence of detachment, not to harden your heart, but to free your eyes. There was once a Roman statesman who faced constant betrayal and intrigue in the Senate. Rivals spread rumors, plotted alliances against him, and tried to provoke him into rash words that could be turned into weapons. Instead of defending himself in every instance, he often remained still, letting others exhaust themselves in gossip and slander. He listened, not with the intent to counter, but with the intent to see. Over time, his restraint became legendary. Those who had tried to unsettle him only exposed their own pettiness, while he remained untouchable, not because he fought harder, but because he refused to fight on their terms. His silence revealed their noise, his clarity revealed their blindness. In our own lives, detachment can feel unnatural at first. We want to defend ourselves, we want to explain, we want to chase validation or strike back at insult. But every time you give in, you hand over a piece of your power. To detach is to hold it. The next time someone provokes you, imagine yourself as an observer. Watch not just them, but yourself. Notice how your chest tightens, how your breath shortens, how your mind rushes to defend. Simply notice and do nothing. In that pause, you'll find a power that no insult can touch. And while the other person may think they've cornered you, it is you who now see them clearly, what drives them, what unsettles them, what they are desperate to hide. Marcus Aurelius also wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This is the heart of detachment, to revoke the power that chaos tries to claim over you. Outsmarting others does not begin with cunning tricks or clever words. It begins with mastering the battlefield within your own chest. If you can still your emotions, you gain the eyes to see what others miss. So ask yourself, in your daily battles, in conversations, in conflicts, in decisions, are you slashing blindly in the fog? Or are you breathing deeply, observing, waiting for clarity? To detach from emotion is to choose sight over blindness, strength over weakness, freedom over slavery to impulse. And once you learn to see clearly, you will recognize something remarkable. Most people reveal themselves entirely, if only you have the patience to watch. That is the first step to outsmarting everyone without them knowing. Not trickery, not deception, but the quiet strength of detachment. For only the one who sees clearly can act wisely. And when you begin to observe, not with emotion, but with calm, you take your first step into a power few ever taste. Now that we've seen how detachment opens the door to clarity, the next question arises naturally. If you can observe others with such focus, can you also turn that gaze inward and truly observe yourself? That, my friend, is where our journey continues. 2. See yourself clearly. Have you ever watched yourself from the outside, almost as if you were a character in someone else's story? Maybe it was catching your reflection in a shop window and suddenly realizing how tense your shoulders were, or hearing your own laugh recorded and wondering if it sounded genuine. Those moments sting a little, don't they? Because they remind us that the person we think we are inside is not always the person the world encounters. And the hardest truth is this: most of us live unaware of how we appear to others, while those around us read us more clearly than we read ourselves. The Stoics insisted that self-examination was the foundation of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "At every hour, give your full concentration to the performance of the task in hand, with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, and with justice." He was urging himself to live with such awareness that even his smallest gestures reflected the values he claimed to hold. To observe yourself like a stranger means to step back from the comfort of excuses and look at your life as it truly is, without filters, without self-deception. I remember a man who swore he was confident in meetings. He believed his colleagues ignored him because of office politics, never considering that his own behavior might play a role. One day, a recording of the meeting was played back, and for the first time he saw what others had always seen. His words rushed, his tone uncertain, his eyes darted downward as if bracing for rejection. What he thought was confidence was nervousness, barely hidden. The realization cut deep, but it was also the turning point. From that day on, he began practicing deliberate pauses, steady eye contact, and slower speech. Within months, people listened to him differently, not because they suddenly decided to respect him, but because he had changed what he projected. His world shifted because he finally observed himself from the outside. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom requires effort, and part of that effort is the courage to hold a mirror up to ourselves and face what we find." Maybe you've noticed it too, the tendency to say yes when you mean no, laughing at jokes that chip away at your dignity, hiding your real opinions for fear of rejection. We tell ourselves it's harmless, but repeated over time, these patterns define us far more than the ideals we carry silently in our hearts. The Stoics remind us, character is not what you dream of being, it's what you consistently do. Think of relationships. A woman once described herself as generous and loyal, always willing to help. Yet, her generosity was driven by fear, the fear of being abandoned if she said no. Outwardly, she looked kind, but inwardly, she was chained by insecurity. Only when she paused and saw this pattern for what it was, did she begin to live differently. She learned to say no, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. And ironically, it was only then that others began to value her presence more deeply. By observing herself like a stranger, she broke free of the illusions that kept her bound. This is the heart of Stoicism, not judging yourself harshly, but seeing yourself clearly. When you look at your own actions as if you were an outsider, you strip away the stories you tell to protect your pride. You see not who you wish to be, but who you are in this very moment. And in that clarity lies power. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see, but once you see it, transformation becomes inevitable. So let me ask you now, if your life today were a film and you were the viewer, would you admire the person on screen, or would you cringe at their habits, their tone, their choices? It's not an easy question, but it's a necessary one, because the more you dare to observe yourself like a stranger, the closer you come to living in alignment with who you truly want to be. If you've ever felt the weight of this truth, take a second and drop a word in the comments: aware. Not for me, but as a marker for yourself, a reminder that you've chosen to see with new eyes. And if these reflections resonate with you, consider subscribing so we can keep walking this path together, step by step, with the same honesty and discipline the Stoics practiced. For in the end, the greatest strategy is not to outsmart the world, but to outsmart the illusions within yourself. And once you learn to do that, you'll be ready to discover the next power the Stoics cherished, the art of silence, and how it turns every conversation into a battlefield you quietly control. 3. The power of silence. There are moments when words feel like armor, when we rush to explain, defend, or fill the air just to protect ourselves from the unbearable tension of silence. Have you ever felt that pull, the awkward pause in a conversation where your heart races and your mind screams, "Say something, anything"? Most of us have. We fear silence because it exposes us. Yet the Stoics knew something different. Silence is not weakness. It is not emptiness. It is power. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Silence, used deliberately, is one of the purest forms of calm strength. It disarms, it unsettles, it reveals, and if you know how to wield it, silence can outsmart more people than 1,000 clever words. Picture a negotiation. Two people sit across from one another at a long table. One is eager, words spilling like coins from a broken purse, explaining every reason why his proposal is fair, why it should be accepted, why it benefits everyone. The other listens quietly, nodding but offering little. Then the room falls silent. The first man squirms, clears his throat, and rushes to speak again, this time revealing concessions he had promised himself not to give away. Who wins? Not the one who spoke the most, but the one who spoke the least. Silence, in this case, was not absence but pressure, a space that compelled the other to reveal himself. In the business world, they call this a tactic. In philosophy, the Stoics call it self-control. Seneca once said, "It is better to be silent and be thought a fool than to talk and remove all doubt." He was not advocating timidity, he was teaching discipline. Our tongues betray us more often than our enemies do. We think that talking endlessly shows strength, but in truth, it shows anxiety, the inability to bear the weight of stillness. A person who can hold silence holds themselves, and a person who holds themselves cannot easily be manipulated. I recall a story of a young soldier brought before a Roman general after being accused of insubordination. His peers expected him to protest, to shout his innocence, to beg for mercy. But when the general asked, "What do you have to say for yourself?" the soldier remained silent. He met the general's gaze without flinching, his silence louder than any denial could have been. The general dismissed him without punishment. Why? Because silence forced the general to look deeper. Was this a guilty man with nothing to defend himself, or a disciplined man refusing to debase himself with pleas? The ambiguity itself was his shield. His silence turned weakness into strength. Think also of your own life. How many times have you explained yourself to someone who didn't deserve an explanation? How often have you spoken in anger, only to regret it later, wishing you had held your tongue? How many secrets have you let slip because you could not endure the pause? The Stoics urge us to remember that every word costs something. To waste words on those who twist them is to spend your fortune on thieves. Silence, on the other hand, is free and priceless. Epictetus taught his students, Be mostly silent, or speak only what is necessary. He understood that silence is not emptiness, but space for observation. When you do not rush to fill the air, you notice more: the twitch of someone's eye when they lie, the hesitation in their voice, the way others shift uncomfortably when truth comes too close. Words often distract us from seeing. Silence clears the field so vision can sharpen. I once knew a teacher who had a gift for silence. When a student said something foolish, instead of correcting him immediately, he would pause and let the silence hang heavy. The class would grow restless. The student would feel his own words echoing back to him, and often he would correct himself before the teacher ever spoke. That pause was more powerful than any rebuke. It gave space for reflection, for realization. And in that space, true learning occurred. You see, silence does not merely protect you, it teaches others who you are. The man who cannot stop talking announces his insecurity. The woman who can sit calmly in silence announces her strength without uttering a word. People lean in to hear those who speak sparingly. Their words carry weight because they are not scattered carelessly. When you speak less, each phrase becomes a stone laid with intention. When you speak constantly, your words are sand, swept away by the first wind. Of course, silence can feel unbearable at first. Our modern world conditions us to fill every space with sound, music, chatter, notifications, explanations. But mastery begins when you can resist that conditioning. Try it. The next time someone challenges you, pause before you answer. The next time someone insults you, wait before you respond. Notice how the silence makes them reveal more, scramble more, falter more. Notice how the silence strengthens you. It feels unnatural at first, but soon you realize it is freedom. Freedom from the compulsion to prove. Freedom from the urge to explain. Freedom from being drawn into battles you never chose. There is a story about a philosopher who was mocked in the marketplace. A group of young men surrounded him, laughing and hurling insults. He said nothing. He kept walking. When someone later asked why he didn't defend himself, he replied, "Would you argue with the echo of your own voice in a canyon?" His silence was not surrender, it was clarity. To him, the mockers were not worthy of his words. That choice not only protected his peace, but also humiliated his tormentors, who expected a fight and were denied it. Sometimes the sharpest blade you can wield is the refusal to draw it. Silence is not always easy. It demands control. It demands faith in your own worth, that you do not need to fight for every scrap of recognition. And yet, when you practice it, you begin to see its power everywhere. A pause before answering reveals more about your steadiness than any quick reply. A refusal to explain reminds others that your life is yours, not theirs to judge. A moment of calm in the midst of chaos can turn the tide of an entire conversation. The Stoics were warriors of restraint because they understood that restraint is the highest form of strength. So I ask you, when was the last time your silence spoke louder than your words? Can you remember a moment when holding back revealed more power than unleashing every argument? If not, then perhaps it is time to practice. Let silence be your ally. Let it carve space where truth can emerge. Let it unsettle those who rely on your reactions to feel in control. And let it remind you that strength does not always roar. It often whispers nothing at all. Silence is not absence. It is presence distilled. When you wield it with intention, you outsmart not through cunning tricks, but through calm mastery. And once you learn to sit in silence without fear, you are ready for the next level of observation, the ability to notice not just the pauses in conversation, but the deeper patterns of human behavior that reveal who people truly are. That is where we turn next. 4. Patterns reveal truth. Have you ever noticed how people reveal themselves not in grand declarations, but in the smallest of repeated actions? A friend who always arrives late, no matter how important the meeting. A colleague who praises you in public, but cannot help adding a subtle criticism afterward. A partner who laughs just a little too loudly when someone else enters the room. At first, we dismiss these details as quirks, harmless habits, but over time they form patterns, and those patterns whisper truths that words often conceal. Life, if you pay attention, is not as chaotic as it seems. It moves in cycles, repetitions, behaviors that announce who people are long before they ever confess it. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Observe what your nature requires, as if you were bound to it. Do not be distracted by what others imagine." He was reminding himself that the essence of a person is not in what they say, but in what they consistently do. If you wish to outsmart others without them knowing, learn to see the patterns, not the performance. Imagine a merchant in the markets of Rome. Every morning he arranges his stall with precision, smiling at customers, greeting them warmly. But watch closely, and you see that whenever someone inspects his wares without buying, his eyes narrow, his lips curl in quiet contempt. One day, he loses a sale because he speaks too harshly, accusing a passerby of wasting his time. Another day, he offers a discount too quickly, eager to secure the deal. Over weeks, the observant buyer learns the rhythm: when he is desperate, when he is confident, when he is lying. Soon, the buyer can bargain effortlessly, predicting the merchant's moves before they happen. Nothing supernatural, nothing manipulative, just attention to pattern. In the same way, our lives are full of these tells. People repeat themselves more than they realize. If you step back and notice, they write their own story for you to read. Seneca warned that most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. But most people do not. They are creatures of habit, slaves to routines of thought and behavior. They will check their phone the moment silence falls, laugh nervously when they are insecure, flatter when they want something, criticize when they feel threatened. These are not random acts, they are cycles. To the unobservant, they are invisible. To the one who watches, they are maps. And when you hold the map, you are no longer surprised by where the road leads. I once knew a man who always spoke with authority at work, presenting himself as decisive and confident. Yet, every time a decision was delayed, he grew restless, tapping his fingers, sighing heavily, repeating himself. At first, no one noticed, but those who paid attention saw the truth. Beneath the mask of authority was a man ruled by impatience. In negotiations, that weakness cost him dearly. For the moment a pause stretched too long, he would make concessions simply to end the discomfort. His pattern betrayed him, and those who understood it could bend him without force. The lesson is not to mock him, but to remember this. Every one of us has patterns that reveal the truth beneath our masks. The question is not whether they exist, but whether we are awake enough to see them. Epictetus taught, if someone handed over your body to a passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along, so they may disturb it. Most people live this way, at the mercy of impulses, repeating the same reactions, never questioning them. But when you learn to recognize patterns without judgment, you gain clarity without cruelty. You are not condemning others for being predictable, you are simply refusing to be blind. You see the repetition, you note the rhythm, and you adjust your steps accordingly. That is wisdom, not manipulation. Think about relationships. Someone might promise they've changed, that the lies or betrayals will never happen again, yet if you step back and watch, you may notice the same excuses, the same lateness, the same quick anger when confronted. Patterns return, like waves against the shore. You do not need to argue, you do not need to accuse, you only need to observe. And in that observation, you find freedom. Marcus Aurelius counseled himself, "If someone can show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." But most people do not seek truth. They seek comfort, and comfort lives in repetition. This is where Stoicism offers its deepest gift. When you recognize human patterns, you must do so without bitterness. Otherwise, you poison yourself with judgment. If you see someone always chasing status, always exaggerating their successes, you do not hate them for it. You simply understand, this is who they are, this is their cycle. You may choose how close you stand, but you do not need to resent them. Clarity without judgment preserves your peace. It allows you to step back without carrying the weight of anger, and it keeps you free from the illusion that people will change simply because you wish them to. In my own life, I once trusted a friend who constantly excused small lies. At first it seemed harmless, little exaggerations, small distortions of truth. But the pattern was there. Each time I ignored it, convincing myself that these were isolated incidents. Eventually, the larger betrayal came. And when it did, I realized I had not been deceived. I had deceived myself. The pattern had been plain. I simply chose not to see it. That is the danger of ignoring patterns. They do not disappear. They only grow. The Stoic path is not to be cynical, but to be honest, to see clearly what is there rather than what you wish was there. So let me ask you, what patterns are you overlooking right now? Who in your life shows you, again and again, who they really are, while you keep hoping for something else? And more importantly, what patterns do you reveal about yourself that others already see, even while you remain blind to them? To recognize patterns without judgment is to live awake. It is to walk into each moment, not with suspicion, but with clarity. You no longer stumble over surprises because you have learned the rhythm of human nature. This is how you outsmart others without them even knowing. You are not manipulating, you are not controlling, you are simply paying attention, and in that attention lies power. For when you see what others cannot even see in themselves, you gain freedom from their illusions and from your own. And that freedom, once tasted, becomes a strength that nothing can easily take from you. When you train yourself to notice patterns, you move through life like a sailor who knows the stars. Others are tossed by the waves, confused by the winds, but you recognize the constellations, the currents, the familiar routes, and in that awareness, you steer with confidence. This is the gift of Stoic observation, clarity in a world that loves to pretend. And once you master this vision, the final step becomes clear. Outsmarting others begins and ends with mastering yourself. And that is where we now turn. 5. Master yourself. First, have you ever realized that the most exhausting battles in your life were not against other people, but against your own impulses? The anger that rose too quickly, the fear that made you hesitate, the desire for approval that made you explain yourself when you didn't need to. These inner forces betray us more often than any enemy outside ever could, and this is where the Stoics gave us their clearest truth. The only true victory is mastery over oneself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Outsmarting others without them knowing is not about clever tricks or manipulation. It is about becoming so steady, so unshakable within yourself that no one else can steer you off course. Think of a time when someone tried to provoke you. Maybe they mocked your work, questioned your choices, or dismissed you in front of others. If you reacted in anger, you gave them what they wanted, proof that they could control you. If you explained yourself endlessly, you handed them your peace, begging for validation they never intended to give. But if you remained calm, if you knew your own worth so deeply that no insult could touch it, you won a victory far greater than the argument. You showed them, and more importantly yourself, that your center belongs to you alone. That is the essence of self-mastery. I remember hearing a story of a Stoic teacher approached by a man consumed with revenge. "They laughed at me," the man said. "They insulted me, and I will destroy them for it." The teacher listened quietly, then asked, "When they insulted you, they wanted you to suffer, did they not?" The man nodded. "And now, by plotting your revenge, are you not still suffering, long after their words have passed?" The man fell silent. The teacher smiled gently. "They only win if you carry them in your heart. Put them down and you walk free." The man left without another word, but with a new realization. His enemy was not the mockers. His enemy was himself. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Adversity is not punishment. It is the training ground where self-mastery is forged. Every insult, every rejection, every temptation is an invitation to prove to yourself that you are not ruled by emotion, by vanity, by fear. When you master that, you are untouchable. Outsmarting others is no longer about playing their games. It is about rising above them entirely. So let me ask you, are you tired of being swayed by every word, every opinion, every glance of approval or disapproval? Do you not see how exhausting it is to let the world pull your strings? The Stoic way is not to cut yourself off from life, but to anchor yourself so firmly that you cannot be moved without your consent. That is the highest strategy, the deepest wisdom. For the one who rules himself cannot be ruled by another. This is the final truth. The real victory is not when others fall into your silence, or reveal themselves through their patterns, or crumble before your calmness. The real victory is when you no longer need to prove anything at all. Outsmarting everyone without them knowing is simply the natural result of living with clarity, with restraint, with mastery. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are directing yourself. And in that state, no one can touch you. So walk forward with this in your heart. Let others play their games. Let them seek validation. Let them gossip. Let them provoke. You have chosen a higher path. You have chosen to master yourself. And when you do, you have already outsmarted them all, not through cunning, but through strength, not through trickery, but through wisdom. And that, my friend, is the kind of victory no one can ever take away. True mastery begins when you no longer need to prove yourself. Outsmarting others quietly is simply the result of clarity and self-control. Subscribe if you are ready to walk this path, and comment clarity to seal it. Keep going, your journey deepens next.